Hi everybody, welcome to our second episode of Talking Automotive with Mark and John. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palavestra. Mark, good to have you on board and welcome.
Hi John, great to be back again for our second podcast. Interesting discussion and some insights re the market. And we talked about how the market's down. There's been two really good surveys put together just recently. One is a Deloitte survey, and it's actually a global survey, and it's really worth our listeners drilling down to if they have not already had a look at that information. Now, on top of that, car sales, another organisation here in Australia, have got fantastic information, and once again, well worth doing a bit of a deep dive into their detail. But we also covered off things like where the buyer behaviours are right now, where they're going to go to, but also the key actions around that local area marketing and that digital and community engagement piece. So I think they're pretty important bits that definitely keen to explore further.
Well, let's jump into the discussion and hopefully the listeners enjoy hearing what we spoke about. Hi everybody, welcome to the second episode of Talking Automotive with Mark and John. Morning, Mark.
Morning, John. And hopefully the first podcast, a lot of our listeners and viewers got some value out of it. Very keen to do a more deep diving into the state of play and also leading into our first guest speaker that we'll be having shortly on our program around that local area marketing and the opportunities around that.
So Mark, this week we're going to focus a bit on what dealers need to do at their dealerships. It's pretty tough conditions and that, so that's going to focus our main area. What can they do on low budgets? So I think that's a very important part in that. So we've seen the figures this week coming out of the Australian figures, and I think April was down 50% and the year to date down 20%. So it shows figures have come off strongly. What's your view on where the figures are going to settle on?
It's an interesting one, John. The figures are artificial. There's no doubt about it, because the massive behavioural change that's in play, where people physically can't go out, and mobility has stopped. We talked about that briefly in the last session. But in this Deloitte survey, just a couple of highlights for specifically the automotive side of things is that 56% of customers or respondents right now are looking at keeping their car longer than planned. So that's for Australia. And 31% are putting off regular maintenance. So two things, buying a car and maintaining a car, but that's only just a temporary state of play because you're in lockdown. You're not going anywhere, you're not driving anywhere, you can't do anything with it. So that's an artificial drop to 50%. It's not going to be 50% for the rest of the year. So when you look at that 56% keeping their car longer, now there's an upside that 79% of these owners like the idea of owning a car. So there is this predisposition, yes, we need to own a car. And some of the changes that we talked about before, and here's some data that supports that, is that 66% of people want to limit the use of public transport going forward. And 61% want to limit rideshare. So that's got some impacts for Uber and also the taxis and the other rideshare services out there, that there is this concern around that. Now, that's the Deloitte data. Now, on top of that, car sales, another organisation here in Australia have got fantastic information, and once again, well worth doing a bit of a deep dive into their detail. But with their car sales insights, they just did a recent survey as well through March and April, and a third of the respondents are not comfortable with the hygiene on public transport. This aligns up with what the Deloitte data is telling us. And 60% of non-car owners are now considering buying a car because of that, because they need that social distancing and space. So right now, that 50% drop that we talk about in volume, there is this pent-up demand that when mobility returns and we're allowed to go out again, that there will be an increase. Now, it's interesting, the upside around that whole opportunity is definitely coming down to what is happening and what can you do now ahead of the curve. And this leads very much into what are the actions that you really need to be taking to get ready for when the people return. Because right now there's a lot of behaviours, and the car sales data shows a lot of searching online already. People are looking. They will come back into the market. That 50% drop is artificial. It will not be maintained. And there will be buyers coming back in with those two key surveys telling us.
Mark, I think we're seeing different sectors. So the market's down 50%, but not every sector in the market's down. What's your view on that? Because if you look at rental, that could possibly be down because airports are closed and not much is coming in. Government will probably be continuing to buy. We're seeing some of the commercial areas, they'll still need to buy. There's certain commercial areas like tradies and that are still working. So they'll still be needing to service and trade vehicles. Well, what do you see in the different segments, and where do you think the opportunities are for dealers to be looking at?
Well, John, B2B is a very important time, especially this time of year. May, June is the peak selling period. And this is where businesses traditionally need to roll over their vehicles, and particularly tradespeople coming into, if they've had a good year financially, they need to spend, buy another commercial vehicle, roll their vehicle over. And this is where we've seen the medium pickup and cab chassis market as being a very strong market. So that segment, all segments have been hit, but less likely is that area to be hit because there still is construction underway in this country. We don't manufacture anymore, but we still build a lot of things. And a lot of those building projects are continuing on. There have been some that have slowed, but in the main, they're still functioning with renovations and other building projects that are being undertaken. Private buyers have definitely been hit. And this is where the confidence, if your job or your income has been hit, you're sitting on your hands for the short term. But once again, that's a short-term thing. So May, June may not be as strong as previous years. Definitely don't expect it to be. But you're right, there will be opportunities for certain segments because there are still people with money. And it's interesting, the dealers that we've been in contact with, is a mixed bag. There are those that have shut up shop and just battening down and have gone into hibernation. They've put staff off, or they've cycled staff down to 1 or 2 days a week. Other dealerships who have maintained trading have still had a fairly positive result, albeit slightly down on last year, but not down to the 50% levels that we're seeing across the industry. So there is still some private business out there. There is still B2B business out there. And there still is government business out there. However, some government agencies have slowed and delayed their purchases, but in the main, those that are providing essential services still need to have vehicles and still need to have maintenance around those vehicles. So there's still those elements, and this is why it's important to have a mix in your portfolio for after sales and sales, that you only don't just look at retail, because when retail in these sorts of environments gets whacked big time. Great fun in the great fun times, but when times get tough, retail drops right away. And that's why it's so important to have a stratum of business, government, retail, and even some FMO stuff as well.
But I think, Mark, with a lot of people ordering online at the moment, there's going to be a huge opportunity with courier companies, even restaurants delivering food to people's houses, and that they're all looking for vans, they're looking for utes and that to use to deliver parcels and that. So there's still opportunities in the market. You just have to be very careful about how you target them and how you approach them. In terms of private buyers, do you think the downturn is across all private buyers, or do you think the top of the market they'll still be buying cars, the luxury side, or is it going to be more pragmatic, value for money type vehicles?
When you just some feedback from various dealers out there, and also from the used car side of things, the auction houses have really been conservative with the premium end as far as used cars are concerned. They've actually been hitting them quite hard. So right now, if you want to be bold and snap up some used car stock in the premium end, those vehicles have come back significantly in price, and there's some pretty good opportunities. The question there is, when will the market come back so that you can buy low right now and sell well when it returns, or how long do you have to retain those cars for? But to answer your question, I see the value for money end is going to be resilient. It's a bit like the share market. There's always a flight to quality in tough times, and then you tend to be take more risks in the buoyant and affluent times. But it's funny, if you look at the detail around investing. Be bold when others are bearish, and be bearish when others are bold is a phrase that often share investors look at. But it's interesting just with that online. If you look at getting back to the Deloitte survey, 12% in Australia, 12% of the respondents actually specified, if available, I will buy my next vehicle online. So it's a small number at this stage. The 12% is bigger than what a lot of people would have expected. And I think there's an opportunity here in that mainstream space that, okay, if I'm adverse to having contact with individuals, I want to keep my distance, I've done my research, everything lines up, and I'm keen to buy online, 12% of people are saying they would explore that opportunity. And I think you'll find if the experience is good enough, the word will get out there, and you'll find that 12% will start to increase. Because right now there still is that trust. I want to go in, feel, touch, and I want to be able to understand what I'm buying and who I'm buying from. And this is because it's still a fairly significant purchase choice. So this opportunity of 12%, we need to make sure we get our messaging right so that we can really take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. I think there's some really interesting things happening in the market at the moment.
What's interesting, John, there's two elements of earned and paid media that you can have. So there's the advertising that you pay for, and that's what used to be the local paper would be the digital spend with the advertising, TV if you're in a regional area, or if you're part of a group to do some TV. But it's right now, people are at home. So if you think of where your audience is, they're at home, they're online. What you need to do, and I'll use the old technology here, getting into people's phones is what it's all about. Into their phones, into their tablets. So obviously digital advertising is an important part of that, but the real winner are the social media aspects. So also your online listings. So when you're transactional with your online listings, to make sure that the story lines up with what you're telling on those listings. Videos, we talked about that before, videos for the listings. Following up lost leads. I know they sound silly, but lost lead follow-up. And there's an organisation out there, Optima, that do a great job in assisting dealers in following up lost leads. Interesting data from those guys is that 7% of lost leads are still in market. So you can still resurrect it. So it's well worth going back through your list of customers who you think are lost, because they're still in market at some point in time. Now, they may not be in market right now, but this is where you start the conversation again, because if you're not talking to them, potentially someone else will. But also the beauty is right now, and this is where the opportunity lies, if others have hibernated and you're not, suddenly you're not competing against who you were competing with 3 months ago. So although the market's contracted, the competition has actually contracted as well, given those behaviours of hibernation. If everyone hibernated, then and you're the only one out and playing, you've got an open field. So the trick here is to look at what you've got in your team, look at your inventory levels, look at your listings, and then look at your social media strategy and your PR strategy, which actually doesn't cost you money. Because the PR side of things is getting a message out there in a way that makes sense, that is truthful, is honest and genuine, and really gets back to what you're about and who you are, and gives people an understanding of why they should buy from you. Because it gets back to this whole trust thing. So if you're telling a story around that you're here, you're part of the community, and genuinely show that you're part of the community, show the things that you're doing, because you are doing things anyway. Most dealers are doing something in the community in some way, shape or form. Just highlight that, get that story out there. People are bored, they're at home, they're stuck looking on their devices, doing other things. So tell a story, make sure your listings make sense, have some video around that, but also do the community side of things and have your COVID story. What are you doing re-COVID? How are you making it safe for them to buy a car? It's okay to buy a car. It's okay to come in for service. These are the sort of things that you've got in play.
So, Mark, I think you're making some really good points there. There's tremendous opportunity of things that dealers can do, but it's very much a lot more targeted, and you need to know exactly what you're doing and to who. So I think that breaks down. I think the very important part is to understand who are your customers and who are buying at the moment, because that's an important thing. There's no point to just go out with broad campaigns or broad strategies and that. And at the moment, dealers are sitting, they've got time on their hands, which they don't normally have. Normally you're running pretty tight and you delivering cars and you test drive and you solving customer problems and that. Right now you've got time to do these things. So the first thing is, some of the things that I was thinking of that dealers could do in their community is understanding who are all the businesses and who can you do business with in your PMA and in the postal codes that you cover, not in the whole of the city that you live in, but in your PMA and the postal codes there. And these you can purchase lists of companies in the area, you can look up directories and that, and take all those businesses and build them into your CRM tool. So you actually identify who you can possibly do business with, and then break them into groups, because through that you can then identify who are all the tradies in your area, who are the electricians, who are the plumbers, and then start to do very specific targeting of marketing campaigns to those people in the future. So if you don't know that, you can't do huge amount. Once you've got that, you can then start to work with those businesses, understand what vehicles they currently have. Because a sweet spot, I always think, is targeting not the big companies, the big fleets, because everybody targets that and it's very competitive. It's quite cutthroat. You have to really discount to get into those very big fleets, the 50 fleets, the fleets with 50 units or 100 units or 150 units. But the sweet spot is that 1 to 6 unit, because people seem to neglect those. So who are all those fleets in your area? What vehicles do they currently have? What mileage are they doing? How often are they replacing them? When are they going to replace their next vehicle? What competitors are currently selling to them? Why are they buying from competitors? Is it a product thing? Is it price? Is it a service thing? So once you start to build all that information, that allows you to then start to target those customers. So once you have all that information, you can then say, okay, where do these customers hang out? What social media do they have? Do they have Twitter accounts? Do they go on TikTok? Do they have Facebook? Do they have LinkedIn? And you need to get onto all those social media sites. So you start to build rapport with them and start to develop a relationship. So when they do come to buy a vehicle, they will then look at you because they drive past your dealership every day. They see you, and now it starts to bring a face to who owns that dealership and who works in that dealership. So to me, those are really important things. And the second thing is your competitors. I think you brought up the point, and it's a really good point, because your competitors are you need to understand who they are, what are they doing, what offers are they putting out at the moment, what sort of activities they're doing. Because when you understand that, it's easier to counteract and try and find a different way to approach the customers. And I think the third thing is the actual community, and you did mention that, and I think it's a great point, because you need to understand what is happening in your community. Because right now with COVID, there's a whole lot of charity organizations out there, and they're doing it really tough. So you got things like the clubs, Lions, Rotary, all these type of organizations. You got food banks, you got soup kitchens. There's a whole lot of organizations out there. They've lost volunteers because normally those are staffed by elderly type of people. Those people have gone. So they're really struggling. A lot of it, you can get quite involved in the community with not having to outlay a huge amount of money or do a huge amount of things.
Your point's a very valid one, is that going forward, a lot of those retirees that used to do the volunteering aren't going to be able to do the volunteering. So the people who are on 4-day weeks, encourage them to get one of their off days to do some goodwill stuff. And you might even sling them some money for it.
Now what they should be doing is identifying all the charities, all the organizations they can work with and that, because they've got the time to sit and work that out, and what are they going to do in the future. So what is their marketing plan going to be?
Now, John, it's interesting. I've been looking at some of the AFL clubs and some of the other sporting clubs. What they're doing on their websites is actually using older footage of historical stuff and just saying, remember when. Because right now there's an opportunity to leverage that nostalgia. I think definitely going forward, you need to be doing more, and as you've outlined. But if you think right now, the loaning of the vehicle, I think, is a fantastic initiative. Those with vans and utes, there is a need to get the not-for-profit and the community service people resources to move. And we've, being an industry that provides transportation solutions, that is a number one winner for sure. But there's an opportunity to use previous activities that you've done and highlight them, and just remind people that you are in fact involved in the local footy club or the soccer club. You are supporting netball, and how good was it for the netballers to be doing this? And here's one of the netballers in isolation doing some training. Well done. And you can really do and tell a story still, even though we're in lockdown. You can still tell a story that people engage with and understand and relate to. So if you've done something, tell the story. We did this last year, and when we come out of lockdown, we want to do it again this year. But it has to be genuine. It can't be seen to be something that is contrived, because people will see through it. But there is definitely an opportunity to leverage previous and also current state, future state within that storytelling.
So what you've also seen is, I've noticed there's been some brands that have been loaning vehicles to young students who are buying groceries and that for older people and delivering them to their home. So those are some types of initiatives that can be done, and to support the community and get known in the community. So,
and definitely, and this is where getting those actions in play now, but having that story to be told. Sadly, a lot of these initiatives the story doesn't get out. The story does not get out, and that's the beauty of this time right now, is that there is time to actually get the story out, and there's actually time for people to listen and hear the story.
Mark, in terms of advertising offers and that, do you think it's worth dealers to actually put out offers on the table?
I think you need to be clearing your inventory right now. You need to be using whatever, if it's a new car, whatever your manufacturer or your supplier is providing you with support. You need to be consistent with the message from what they're doing, what you're doing, and how you're listing it, and what you're doing from a local area marketing perspective. You definitely want to get that inventory down, but that's why you also need to be planning what's next. Because if you know once lockdown stops, this 50% is artificial, as we said before. This 50% drop in market is artificial. The market will come back, and it will come back as it always does. So be prepared for it. And this is where the question comes down to: if you're buying used car stock, are you bold in what you buy? New car stock, use the support that your manufacturer is giving you to clear them, and the messaging that they're using to clear them. You mentioned before about which segments to target. You'd still have an offer in play for retail when retail comes back on, because there are still retail buyers out there now. And this is where it gets back down to making sure you do all the basics, all those 1%ers that we all know. And this is the difference between knowing and doing. We all know what to do. It's actually, can we we actually do what we need to do? And it's that listing it properly, using videos, responding to when you do get a lead, but not burning that lead, because that lead may not buy today, but they may buy as soon as the state of lockdown ends, and they suddenly need to come out and buy a car. So it's having that conversation all the way along. And there is enough time to have that conversation. We're not that flat out that we can't have those conversations.
I think, Mark, to wrap up, I think that some of the key points that have come out today: one is to identify where the opportunities are, use social media and create conversations with customers where you can engage with customers. Information comes across your feed, you need to like it, retweet it, or share that information, because that starts to build the conversation. So it can't just be one-dimensional.
Yes, John, absolutely. You've covered some really good points. Peak selling period right now. We're coming into tradie central as far as LCVs should be foremost, front and foremost of everybody. So targeting B2B definitely makes sense this time of year. That social media, that local area marketing and the PR story that you tell. This is a really strong time to be telling a PR story, but it has to be genuine. People will see through a manufactured or contrived PR story that's not genuine, that you're not really part of the community. So the critical piece here is you've got a story to tell and really get out there and effectively tell it. Be proud of it. So tell that story, show that you're part of the community, whether it's sporting clubs, footy clubs, or the initiatives that you talked about from a not-for-profit and also that social welfare perspective, the things that you're doing. Tell the story and be proud of what you do.
So I'd like to thank everybody for listening today. It's been good sharing ideas. We appreciated all the comments that came in from our last podcast. So any ideas you have or any information you'd like us to cover, please let us know. So we look forward to talking to you next week again.